Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Actsafe Injury Prevention Week's presentation of Sick and Tired, a conversation about stress and fatigue. My name is Manu Nelutla, and I'll be your moderator for this session. Before I introduce our feature presenter, I would like to first acknowledge the traditional indigenous lands that we all live and gathered on today. Although this meeting is online, we each still enjoy the pleasure of living within an indigenous territory. Our event takes place across Canada within many such Indigenous territories. To highlight the importance of this acknowledgement, I would like to urge you, following this session, to visit the Native Land Digital website and search the territory on which you are located. That website is www.native-land.ca. I would also like to review some procedures for this session. We encourage lively interaction during this session. You can participate by typing your comments and questions into the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and will feed questions to the presenter at the end of her presentation. This presentation is also live on Facebook. So if you're commenting on the Facebook live stream, one of our moderators on the Facebook will be feeding in your comments to me. The presenter will not be able to see your questions directly. Please let me know if you want to be identified or if you want to have your question asked confidentially in the chat. Please type that before your question. I want to remind you all that this session will be recorded and will be available for viewing online on our AAP Week website in the very near future. Now to this session. In the world of pandemics, racism, riots, and economic crisis, it's not unusual to feel like we are barely hanging on. The unending loop between stress and fatigue is not an easy one to jump off. Today, we will address the relationship between these two as a battle for our attention, with emphasis on what matters most to control us from spiraling out of control. Presenting today is Mike Harnett. Mike Harnett is the president of Solaris Fatigue Management, a consulting firm that specializes in optimizing worker health, safety, and performance. She is regarded as a subject matter expert on the science of fatigue and ergonomics and has been a consultant to various government agencies, including the Canadian Standards Association, the Rail Association of Canada, US Department of Transportation, and NASA. With a background in human factors and sleep neurobiology, Mike is recognized for her ability to take complex subjects and deliver their content in a simplified and innovative manner for all to understand. An award-winning speaker, she is an internationally sought-out presenter and educator. And she's also famously known amongst our ergonomics professionals circle as the fatigue warrior. So welcome, Mike, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Manu. It's a pleasure to be here, and I was happy that I could step in. I'm going to share my screen now. If you just give me a second here. All right. So the title of this is Sick and Tired. And I chose this because I think it's something that we're all dealing with right now. We've got certainly a lot of issues surrounding stress with what's going on in the world and our own personal lives. And then, of course, tied to that and overlapping that is the whole concept of fatigue. So we're going to have a little bit of a talk about the relationship between the two and how we can take care of both at the same time. So as Manu had kind of highlighted earlier, in this world of today, we are so stressed out. If you watch the news, I don't even try to watch the news anymore, because if I do, I'm going to hear about COVID. I'm going to hear about racism. I'm going to hear about riots. I'm going to hear about the economy and people losing their jobs. And God forbid we have the second coming of the toilet paper famine. It's just on top of us constantly, no matter what we're listening to, no matter what we're seeing in social media, we just can't escape it. And that's not a surprise then that we struggle with this stress, because typically what happens is when we're under stress, it goes away as soon as the stress goes away, right? So that on switch goes off. But the problem that we have now is that this unique situation, the stress isn't going away. It's continuing and continuing and continuing, and there's no timeline for when it will go away. So the truth is, we may never experience a return to normal as we knew it pre-2020. Now let's add that on to your typical sources of stress within your own industry. There's been a lot of interesting research that's come out recently, and within the entertainment industry, we know that obviously you have high work demands, you have long work hours, and there's really high work expectations when you do go to work. On top of that, there's the uncertainty about future work, and with that, of course, that's tied to your finances. And then there's the erratic work hours, and there's a big not the right word, correlation between erratic work hours and certainly sleep aspects. And then, of course, trying to balance your family and relationships with all of this in mind. Now, what's quite frightening actually is there's a study done recently that showed that a lot of the people within the entertainment industry are self-employed entrepreneurs, right? You're basically not really employees of any particular company. And what they found when they compared self-employed entrepreneurs within the entertainment industry versus those who are actual employees within the industry, well, they were 10 times more likely to have anxiety and 5 times more likely to be depressed. And a lot of that just has to deal with the fact that you're not just dealing with your job when you're on site. It's the fact that now you're having to market yourself, to run yourself as a business, and all the extras that come along with that. Now, there's been a lot of correlations between suicidal thoughts and stress and fatigue recently. And again, I'm going to correlate this back to the industry in a minute, but in Canada, we know that as a leading cause of death, it's 10th in the US, it's 9th in Canada. But when we start looking at specific age groups, we know that it's 4th as a leading cause of death among 35 to 54-year-olds, and it's 2nd among those 10 to 34. And what's kind of interesting in a disturbing way is that males are 3 times more likely to commit suicide, and this has been consistent since 1950, since Canada's been recording this kind of information. Now, within your industry in particular, the arts, entertainment, recreation area, as an occupational classification, it is ranked as the 3rd highest suicide rate. And what's interesting is some people say that it actually should be ranked higher, but the recreation aspect that's been kind of chucked into your category, which includes sports, they think that's kind of bringing your rate down a little bit. So they actually think it might be even higher. So we know that sleep disturbances and sleep disorders, they're a consistent factor with suicidal thoughts and behaviors. That's been proven throughout numerous studies. And what we're finding is that as Canadian adults, we do have this issue of chronic stress. But in these particular studies, this was released in 2019, they made a nice little infographic of it, the Public Health Association of Canada. They said that adults in Canada, 23.2% of them are suffering from chronic stress, and those are the ones who are getting adequate sleep, and we'll define that in a minute. But those who are getting insufficient sleep were much higher at 36%. And then they looked at it from a mental health perspective in terms of either having a health disorder or some kind of mental illness. And they found that if you had adequate sleep, the numbers were around 5%, but if you had insufficient sleep, it more than doubled, and it was over 12%. So sleep and stress and mental health, big connection here. So what does that mean to us? Well, it means that if we're not getting enough sleep, then of course, then there's more stress. And if we don't take care of that stress, then our sleep is affected, and our sleep then turns into anxiety, and that anxiety means less sleep again, and that turns into depression, and so on and so forth. So it becomes this endless, vicious cycle of one feeding into the other. So here's where it gets interesting. It's kind of that chicken or egg thing. What came first? Is it the chicken or the egg? Is it stress or is it fatigue? Now, for many, many years, we always recognized that stress, anxiety, and depression were linked to fatigue. And we used to think that that was the actual direction of the cause, that stress, anxiety, and depression would lead to sleepiness and insomnia. But it's only recently that we've discovered it's actually the reverse. We actually know now that it is at the root, it's sleeplessness and insomnia that are manifesting into anxiety, depression, and much more serious conditions such as even schizophrenia. So what does that mean? It means we need to start getting a little bit more sleep. In order to have a healthy mind, we need a healthy sleep. So are you getting enough? Now, for those of you who have heard me speak before, you probably heard some of this information before, so I apologize if I'm reiterating myself, but it's very important information. This is all about sleep science. So the science is clear. Every adult needs somewhere between 7 to 9 hours of recuperative sleep every 24 hours for the body and the brain to fully repair itself, okay? Now, when I say every adult, I am talking anywhere between 95 and 97% of the population. There are going to be that very small percentage that actually have a gene mutation that doesn't allow them to get 7 hours of sleep, and they may get by with 6 or 5. Believe me when I say probably none of you listening on this particular webinar have that condition, that gene mutation, okay? A lot of people think, oh, that must be me because you're only getting 4, 5, or 6 hours of sleep. No, it means you're just basically cutting your sleep short. Now, here's one of the problems we have with your industry. And in this case, if you are somebody who works in an erratic industry or have an erratic schedule, then we know that you are probably in chronic sleep deprivation. And on average, you're probably getting 2 hours less sleep than people who are on regular daytime schedules without having any kind of erratic schedules or changing schedules on a frequent basis. That ties into other problems that we have. So when we look at Canadians overall and how you as an industry compare, first off, let's look at men versus women. If you are getting less than that minimum requirement of 7 hours of sleep, and keep in mind, a lot of you need more than 7 hours, a lot of you will need 8 or even closer to 9. But if you get less than 7, your sleep duration is drastically affected. And we know that men in particular are getting less sleep than women, 35% versus 29%. But what's interesting is when we look at sleep quality, it's women that have a bigger problem. They have difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep. So they have a lot more disturbances throughout the night. Now, a lot of times that could be attributed to if you have young kids in the house, women seem to be a little bit more programmed to be responding to children in the nighttime. But it's interesting to see that there is this swing in who's affected. Now, getting back to this erratic sleep, here's why we're concerned about it. When you have a non-routine kind of lifestyle where you're constantly changing your start times or your shift times, or when you eat, when you socialize, when you exercise, when you get up, when you go to bed, the more erratic that sleep is, the more your rhythmic genes go out of sync. And in fact, it can cause up to 97% of our circadian rhythms, our rhythmic genes, to go out of sync. We call that circadian rhythm disruption. And that disruption has been linked to everything from mental illnesses, such as schizophrenia, as I mentioned before, bipolar disorder, and depression. Another study linked it directly to neurological conditions like Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, and even multiple sclerosis. So from a mental health perspective, there is a direct link between not getting enough sleep or having erratic sleep and the onset of these kinds of conditions. And then, of course, once you have them, it makes getting to sleep even worse. Now, doesn't my body know better? I have a lot of people that think they're getting enough sleep simply because they get up without an alarm clock. But the reality is, no, you cannot train your body to get by on less sleep than what it is biologically programmed for. So again, we are going to need somewhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep for our body to completely repair itself. Every time that you cut your sleep short or you don't get that minimum hours of sleep in a 24-hour period, then you start to accumulate sleep debt. And what's really important to understand, especially in this industry, is that we are what's called a diurnal species, a day-oriented 24-hour species. That means, as I've mentioned, every 24 hours you require a certain amount of rest period. Now, if you don't get it in 24 hours, yeah, you can probably recuperate from that. But if you're consistently cutting back and then thinking, no big deal, I'm going to work my butt off while we're on this project, while we're doing this particular show or film, and then I get a big block of 3 months off. No, our body doesn't repair that way. We are not a 3-month species. We are a day species, a 24-hour species. So building up all of that sleep debt, you will not lose the negative effects of that when you have that 3-month period off. you've already done the damage, and the damage is significant. And having 3 months off will help to some degree, but it is not going to take care of all the lack of sleep you had during that period of time that you were working. And the reason that this is so important to understand is because there is absolutely nothing more important to your overall health and longevity than sleep. Not what you eat, not what you drink, it is sleep, because nothing affects you at the DNA level of every cell in your body like sleep. And if you don't get enough sleep, then you accelerate the aging of those cells at the DNA level. And that is what causes the disease onset. What we do know is that for those who are consistently getting, for example, 6 hours of sleep versus 7 hours of sleep per day, there's a 13% higher mortality rate. The number of years varies depending on the studies that you see. But for example, we know shift workers in particular, who are notoriously getting a couple of hours less sleep than people who don't work shift work. We see anywhere from 7 to 10 years difference in terms of mortality. And if you get only 4 hours of sleep, the very next day, it's very likely you're going to have uncontrolled microsleeps. And that's going to occur when you're doing something very boring and mundane, such as driving home after a shoot. Or you could have uncontrolled microsleeps if you have subsequent days of less than 6 hours. So there's the acute effect of having not enough sleep. And then there's the cumulative effect, because you remember that sleep that builds and builds and builds every day that you don't get that 7 hours of sleep. If you only get 5 hours on Monday and 5 on Tuesday and 5 on Wednesday, you are accumulating the sleep debt, and it's growing and growing and growing, right? So here's why sleep is so important. I want to briefly go through the stages of sleep and what's occurring during those different stages, so you have a better appreciation for why it's necessary to get a certain amount of sleep, okay? So what I'm showing you here are the different stages of sleep, and as you can see in the different stages, you're going to see different activity going on in the brain. So all of these brain waves are controlling the body and other aspects of the brain to do certain activities, such as controlling hormones or controlling our sleep-wake cycle, those types of things. So it's important to understand that at each stage, the brain waves change, okay? So let's go through these briefly so we have a better appreciation for it. Hopefully you're all in the awake state. I would like you to be in the beta state. The beta state means that you're listening, your brain is firing very, very rapidly, and you're digesting the information, trying to understand what I'm saying, as opposed to the alpha state, which would be like you sitting at home on the couch watching Game of Thrones, where you're not necessarily as invested. All right, so let's talk about what happens when you actually put that head on the pillow. The first stage that you're going to go into is stage 1, but stage 1 and stage 2, they happen almost consecutively. They're very, very light stages of sleep. They're usually going to last anywhere from around 20 to 30 to 40 minutes in length total. So at this point, you put your head on the pillow, you close your eyes, and the first thing that happens is your brain waves begin to slow down, and that triggers things like your breathing slowing down, your muscles are told to relax, your heart rate drops, your blood pressure goes down. And it's not very uncommon to find that snoring occurs very quickly after someone puts their head on the pillow. What's interesting with this particular part of sleep is this is where a lot of our motor skill consolidation takes place. So for example, people who might be in the stunts area, if you have to learn a new skill, a new physical skill in particular, it's a really good idea to have a nap after you've been learning that skill to consolidate it in your memory. That's when it happens. So we need to get light stages of sleep to coordinate that motor skill consolidation. Now, when you are in the light stages of sleep, one of the things that happens is that it's very easy to wake you up from that state because you're not into the deep stages yet. So this is where if you were on the couch and you kind of drifted off and you've got the remote control in your hand, if I tried to remove that remote control from you, you would probably wake up and say, hey, I was watching that. And you probably weren't, but you'll even deny that you were asleep because it's so quick and easy to wake up out of the light stages of sleep and get back into the rhythm of the day. But that all changes when you go into the deep level of sleep. This is called the long, slow delta brain waves, all right? This is our physical recuperation period. And a couple of key things are going on at this point. First, This is when toxic waste is removed from the brain. We need to get into the delta brain waves, because what happens at this stage of the game is the brain becomes very, very quiet, and it actually shrinks a little bit. And when it shrinks, it allows for more fluid to surround the brain and take out the toxic waste that's building the sleep pressure, the adenosine, and two byproducts in particular called tau and beta amyloid, which are responsible for laying down plaque and destroying neurons and causing Alzheimer's disease. So we need to get to the deep layers of sleep to get that toxic waste removed. It's like a toilet flushing mechanism. It flushes it out down to the liver. If we don't get to that stage 3 of delta sleep, or if we don't get enough of it, then that toxic waste begins to lay down like plaque and destroy those neurons or tangle them up. The other thing that happens during this part of the sleep period is the release of human growth hormone. And the human growth hormone, this is the only time it's released in the body, and it's responsible for all the physical repair of all of our tissues, all of our organs, even our skin. So a lot of people, when they're tired, their skin starts to look haggard and they look really old. That's because you weren't getting enough deep sleep with the HGH being released. Most importantly, that HGH is important for repairing our immune system, so we become less susceptible to things like COVID. It's also the period where we have our long-term memory consolidation take place, so you remember things like your anniversary or your kid's birthday. But unlike light sleep, the brain is really, really quiet at this point, and you can see the long, slow brain waves. So if we had to wake you up out of this delta deep sleep, it would be very difficult to wake you up. And when you do wake up, you would be very, very groggy for a period of time, because we're trying to ask your brain waves from going from this really slow isolation to a very rapid firing. And it takes the brain time to get back to that rapid firing alert state. So that's called sleep inertia, when you wake up and you're very groggy and foggy and you just can't seem to get your act together. Now, once we go through those 3 stages of sleep, those are all the non-REM stages, then we drop into REM sleep. So REM, this is basically a complete reversal from delta sleep. This is when the body is effectively paralyzed while the brain now kicks into high gear, and it's all kind of a rapid firing again, but it's very sporadic. And this is the period where the psychological repair and well-being takes place, as well as our primary cognitive repair, and perhaps most importantly for a lot of us, our short-term, or what we call the working memory, takes place. So you remember to do things that you would normally do, but when you're in a tired state, it often gets shut down. So we need to get REM sleep in order to repair us emotionally, have better tolerances, and be able to do things like have better logic, better rationale. We can do complex decision making, better judgments, that type of thing. All right, so now we've gone through one sleep cycle, and here's how it looks. Put your head on the pillow, you're in stage 1, you drop into stage 2, that's the light stages of sleep. Then you drop into the deep sleep, that's stage 3. Then you reverse back out, 2, 1, and then you hit, boom, REM sleep, okay? So one lap or one cycle is gonna be about 90 minutes in length. The thing is, we don't have set times that we're in each one of these stages within that cycle. So here, let me show you how this looks. Here's a typical healthy adult sleep pattern. So let's say across the bottom, you're in bed for 8 hours, right? You're gonna sleep for 8 hours. So you're awake, you put your head on the pillow, and you immediately drop into stage 1, then you drop into stage 2, there's your light stages of sleep, then you drop into stage 3, your delta sleep, okay? Then you rebound up into REM sleep, okay? And then it kind of repeats itself. Now what's really important here, and this is why we need a consolidated block of sleep. We don't want 4 hours sleep plus another 4 hours sleep. We want a long 7 to 9 hour block sleep, because the first 4 hours is when you spend most of your time in delta sleep, the physical repair area. And as you sleep longer, your brain will transition, and that's when you spend most of your time in REM sleep. That's the mental and emotional repair portion of it. If you cut your sleep short, you're cutting out REM sleep, and that's not good. That's going to create all kinds of problems from a stress perspective, a mental health perspective. Now, one of the things you're going to notice up here is this little bleep. We have one here, there's another one over here. That's a waking episode. And we all have waking episodes throughout the night. Most of us won't even notice them. It's usually when we're turning over in bed. But if you have a substantial waking episode where you stay awake for a few minutes and you can't fall back asleep, that's different. And that's unfortunately what happens as we get older. So this is the young, healthy adult. This is the exact same pattern I just showed you, the top one. But this is what happens as we start to get older. You'll notice here, there's the delta, but down here, the delta periods are much shorter in length. And the REM periods, same thing, much shorter in length, but a lot more waking episodes. And part of that is because as we get older, first off, it's tied to, we just produce less of our sleep hormone, but at the same time, we're also waking up because we have a smaller bladder as we get older. It isn't as flexible and it doesn't retain as much fluid before we have to release it. But it also is because we have aches and pains as we get older that will often disrupt our sleep and wake us up. So the older adult in particular is not going to get the same quality of sleep or quantity of sleep perhaps that a healthy young worker will have. So we have to understand the sleep-wake cycle. I mentioned we're diurnal, we're a day-oriented species, and we're driven by two gene expressions. One is called the homeostasis sleep drive. Very simply put, it just means the longer we're awake, the more that sleep pressure begins to build in our brain. There's a product called adenosine that builds in our brain. And when it gets to a certain point, usually after we've been awake all day, it builds to a point where we are struggling to stay awake. At the same time, we have our alertness drive, the circadian drive, which is all about sunlight. And as the sun comes up in the sky, we become more and more alert, more functionally strong, more emotionally we can handle things, and everything is great until the sun goes down. So these two work in harmony with each other to drive us into the sleep period. So it all comes down to the eyes and light. So our eyes, we used to think of them purely as a visual organ. That's all we thought they had a responsibility to do. But the truth is, we actually only about 15 years ago discovered the circadian aspect of light through our eyes. And what that means is we have these little melanopsin receptors in the perimeters of our eyes that pick up light. So it looks like this. When you are exposed to sunlight in particular, which is the brightest light we have, of course, and is filled with a lot of, well, it has all of the spectrum of light, it hits those melanopsin receptors in the eye, and that sends a message back through the retina and to the center of the brain where there's a little master clock in there that we call the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So this master clock is responsible for recognizing that, hey, it's daytime. Based on the amount of light I'm getting in through the eyes. It's daytime, so here's what I'm going to tell the rest of the brain and body to do. And it sends out signals and synchronizes with all of the peripheral clocks in our body. So it tells things like our heart rate to go up, or our bladder to stop producing urine because we should go into sleep now because it's dark, or maybe our kidneys should be producing, or our pancreas should be producing more insulin. So it's very important. This light is going to dictate what goes on in our body from a hormone perspective. Now, there's another influence on these peripheral clocks, not as strong as light. Light is the major synchronizing agent that we have. But the more you have consistency in your external routines, such as when you have light exposure, when you eat, when you go to bed, when you wake up, when you exercise, when you go out and socialize, the more consistent those are in your daily lives, the more routine you have, the stronger the harmony between all of these peripheral clocks and ultimately the master clock. So the key here is to keep synchronicity going on between all of these clocks, because when we desynchronize the clocks because of erratic schedules or because of light at the wrong time, that's when the disease state sets in and it accelerates the aging process. All right, so let's talk about melatonin for a minute. Light melatonin is so very important because melatonin is our natural sleep hormone. We call it the Dracula of hormones because it's only produced in the absence of light. And it's our natural sleep hormone, and it's designed to help us fall asleep and stay asleep. It's also a very powerful antioxidant. And what that means is that every day we are exposed to what we call free radicals, things like pesticides on our foods or pollutants in the air, et cetera, et cetera. And these free radicals can go in and attack us at the DNA level. But what melatonin does as an antioxidant, it goes in and it helps to mop up those free radicals and expel them from the body. So that means it helps us to prevent things like cancer from setting in. Now, as we get older, unfortunately, we produce less melatonin. So that has a negative effect, certainly on our sleep capabilities. And again, light at inappropriate times can depress production, because if we have light and we're staying up late into the evening hours after the sun has set, that light is delaying the production of melatonin. That's why people who work into the night or into the darker hours, when they finally go home, they have difficulty falling asleep. It's because they don't have enough melatonin produced yet. Now, melatonin is going to come from serotonin. So serotonin is one of our feel-good hormones. It's actually produced in the gut and then sent up to the brain. So serotonin is really important because here's the connection between fatigue and mental health or our emotions. So serotonin, known as one of our happiness hormones, we know that there are people that have significantly reduced levels of serotonin, and those people are the ones that are working erratic or shifting schedules. So the serotonin are the ones that make us feel more joy, sensations of pleasure. It makes us more approachable. We're more tolerant of other people's behaviors. We can communicate better. We like to communicate as opposed to not wanting to communicate or communicating, such as this truck driver. We know there's a direct link between road rage and people having low levels of serotonin. All right, so we need serotonin in order to have melatonin. Okay, well, how do we get the serotonin? Well, now we got to take a step back. It comes down to the food that we eat. So in order to have serotonin produced in our body, we need to eat tryptophan. So a lot of you recognize tryptophan as a turkey drug, but tryptophan is contained in all kinds of meat and dairy products. In fact, pork has more tryptophan than turkey does. It's just that when we have turkey, it's usually a great big huge meal. So it's all of these foods combined that make us really drowsy after Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner. But tryptophan is found in things like even quinoa, which is an excellent source of tryptophan, and whole grains. So we have a diet that has tryptophan in it. Then we need to produce serotonin. How do we do that? Well, we have to go out into sunlight. Sunlight will synthesize the serotonin from the tryptophan. So sunlight is key to all of this. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. Now, once we go out in the sun and we get the serotonin produced, and you probably notice this, whenever you walk out into the bright sunshine, you automatically kind of feel your spirits lift. That's what's going on. It's converting that tryptophan into serotonin. Now, when the sun goes down in the sky later on, that serotonin is building and stored in the body. It's converted into melatonin. So this is basically our 24-hour life cycle. Eat the right foods, go outside, get some sun, particularly in the morning, and then in the evening, you have your melatonin production. That is our secret to happiness and to sleep, all right? So the emotional consequences of this, if we don't get the light exposure, if we don't then subsequently get the sleep that we need, we know that people become much more aggressive and intolerant. There's a strong connection between impulsivity and addictive behaviors. In terms of addiction, we know that if you don't get enough sleep, it also encourages a relapse into addictive behaviors. Mood swings are more irrational. There's decreased motivation, diminished emotive expressions. This is kind of important for you in this industry, especially if you're talent on screen, because you will not be able to emote your expressions as well on screen simply because of the lack of light exposure and subsequently sleep loss. At the same time, you're also not good at reading other people's facial expressions anymore. So there's a double whammy going on there. And then, of course, there's always the emotional connection to depression and PTSD. So I'm going to dive into a couple of these a little bit more. When it comes to sleep and light exposure, there's a direct connection to depression. There is an interesting study that was done in 2018. They looked at 900 elderly Japanese and divided them into two categories. And they were exposed to 5 lux. One group was exposed to 5 lux of light versus those who had no light exposure at all. And that 5 lux of light, just to put it into perspective, 1 lux of light is if you had a candle burning 30 feet away from you. That would be 1 lux of light in a completely dark room. So imagine 5 candles burning, right? Compared to sunlight, which is anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 lux of light, okay? So hardly any light in the room, but even so, with that minimal amount of light, they went to bed earlier, they woke up later. So even though they were in bed longer, they weren't sleeping that entire time, and they stayed in bed longer. And they had a 65% increase in depression after 2 years, all because of that light exposure, which affected both their serotonin production and their melatonin production. From an emotional standpoint, in terms of our memory, it's quite interesting. This study, what they did is they took 2 groups of people and they taught them all the same words, 3 groups of words: positive words, negative words, and neutral words. So one group was allowed up to 8 hours sleep in bed. The other group was given total sleep deprivation. And what they did the next day is check their memory to see how well they did at remembering the words. And of course, there was a decrease with everybody. But of course, those who were sleep deprived were much worse at remembering words. So the positive words were way down, negative words, neutral words. But what was fascinating about this, and which has been borne out repeatedly, is that when we are sleep deprived, we will have a tendency to rely on remembering more of the negative stimulus than positive or neutral stimulus. So we become more negative people when we are sleep deprived or constantly cutting back on our sleep. So it kind of explains a lot of society today, I think. Now, technology has a role to play in all of this. One of the things about technology, of course, is the whole concept of blue light, which all of our small handheld devices, they're backlit blue light, and they can cause all kinds of problems for us in terms of suppressing our melatonin production. But there's another role here. The fact that it's a social tool. So much of our technology now revolves around social media and notifications. And whenever that ping goes off, it's activating our brain's reward system. And in some cases, it's almost treating it like a fight or flight. Whenever that ping comes up, it's like, oh, there's something important going on, and your brain wants to know what it's all about. But if it's typically that you're going and responding to positive things, then the brain starts to think this is a reward system every time that notification goes off. So it's really hard to ignore the more that we use these tools. The problem with that is there's a real switch cost here. So if you're in the middle of doing something and all of a sudden you get distracted by a notification, there's one study in particular that showed if you responded to an email that comes in, it would take you 10 to 15 minutes for your brain to get back to where it was prior to that email coming in. So people think that they're multitasking. No, multitasking is a myth. Your brain cannot handle those 2 different roles at the same time. So the more we switch back and forth, the worse it's going to be. And there was an interesting study in 2014 where they said that they call this media multitasking, where you're juggling different digital stimuli, whether it's apps and again, other notifications, websites, that type of thing. The more you juggle these as you're trying to get your work done, it bombards our prefrontal cortex, which is the most important part of our brain. It's the executive control center of our brain. And what it's actually doing is they found that it's actually preventing the development of less gray matter to control our thoughts and emotions. And again, it leads to things like obsessive compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, and depression. So what's the antidote to this whole technology thing? Well, one is to step outside, away from these devices, go out in the sunlight and try to avoid looking at the devices as much as you can. Silence notifications or put them on, that should be a timer so that you only check your email or get notifications maybe every half hour, every hour, or something along that line. Meditation has also been proven to really help in this aspect. In terms of PTSD, this all comes down to the importance of REM sleep. So there's a couple of things going on when we're trying to sleep and get that REM sleep. This is that prefrontal cortex I was talking about earlier. When we're really, really tired or if we don't get REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex shuts down. Now, when it shuts down, that means the blood flow connecting the prefrontal cortex to the amygdala is diminished. The amygdala is our fight or flight response. It's what controls our emotions, okay? So when we are tired or when we don't have enough REM sleep, rather than the prefrontal cortex, which is all about logic and reasoning and controlling this and, puts things into perspective for you, what it does is it stops communicating with the prefrontal cortex and it starts communicating with the most primitive part of our brain called the locus coeruleus. And what that does, it actually heightens our fight or flight response. It puts things into an over-exaggeration and we overreact and we end up taking things out of context a lot of times, and we're just not rational. So REM sleep is really important to keep everything in check, in balance, because that reason and logic is then being maintained. Now, of course, there are sleep disorders that are going to influence a lot of this. There's different types of sleep disorders. For the most part, we kind of use insomnia as a global term when we're describing a lack of sleep. But there's disrupted or fragmented sleep, which is very damaging because it usually affects the delta deep levels of sleep. And then we have people who are excessively sleepy, like narcoleptics or people with hypersomnia. There's different causes. Some of them are lifestyle driven. Some of them are drugs and alcohol driven. Some of them are medical conditions. So the one that we're most worried about is obstructive sleep apnea, simply because this has the most dramatic effect on our total well-being. It's basically a condition where we stop breathing for 10 seconds at a time. So someone who has sleep apnea, it would not be unusual to see them stop breathing several hundred times per night. And every time that you stop breathing, you're starving your heart of oxygen as well as your brain of oxygen. Now in Canada, we know that 1 in 4 Canadians likely have obstructive sleep apnea. But what's more frightening is 3 out of 4 with obstructive sleep apnea do not know they have obstructive sleep apnea. In other words, they haven't been diagnosed. They might notice that they snore, but they don't realize that the reason they're waking up tired and exhausted and can't focus is because they have OSA. And this has been linked to other chronic conditions. People with OSA have 2.5 times more likely to develop diabetes and 2.2 times more likely to suffer from mood disorders. So again, that connection between fatigue and mood disorders. And more recently, we're still waiting on this one to be validated, but there's a lot of early research coming out regarding COVID and the relationship to sleep conditions, and in particular, obstructive sleep apnea. This is an interesting study. What they found, this is over in Sweden, Finland? Maybe it's Finland. 29% of the patients hospitalized for COVID were actually suffering from non-severe obstructive sleep apnea. So light to moderate obstructive sleep apnea, not severe. Now that's in comparison to people who are hospitalized just with OSA at a rate of 3.1%, so substantially higher. Now, of those who were hospitalized for COVID and had OSA, 1/4 of them actually ended up in ICU. This was the most significant factor they found when it came to identifying what are the things influencing COVID. It was actually obstructive sleep apnea. So it's a very important risk factor. So how important is it? Well, let's go through a quiz real quick and you can see if perhaps you are a victim to it. So I want you to give yourself 1 point for every check mark that you put in here. So the first is, do you snore loudly? Louder than talking or loud enough to be heard through closed doors? If so, give yourself a check mark. Do you often feel tired, fatigued, or sleepy during daytime hours? If so, give yourself a check mark. Has anyone observed you stop breathing during your sleep or said that they hear you gasping? If so, give yourself a check mark. Do you have or are you being treated for high blood pressure? Are you male? Sorry, you automatically get a check mark. Are you over the age of 50? Again, you automatically get a check mark. And if you have a large neck circumference, for men, it's a size 17 neck. Men often know their neck size because of dress shirts, if they have to wear something like that. Women, we don't often know, but if you're a rather large person, then you may want to check if it's over 16 inches. If that's the case, you would get another check mark. So you add up all those check marks. There's one more that you may have to add, and that comes down to your BMI. So here's how it works. If you are, for example, 5'10" and you weigh approximately around 185 pounds, let's say, well, we line these two up, and what you're going to get is a score of 27. So I'm not worried about 27. I'm worried about anybody who fits in this category, in the red, the 30, 35, 40 category, okay? If, based on your height and your weight, you fit into this category anywhere, then you need to add one more point to those check marks from before. Then we add them all up, and here's what we get. Low risk of obstructive sleep apnea if your score was 0 to 2. If it's 3 to 4, it's more moderate. If it's 5 to 8, you're high risk for OSA. So this isn't a diagnosis, it's a good screening tool. You may want to consult a physician or talk to a sleep clinic. So with all this stress and all these sleep disorders and medical conditions that we get as we get older, how are we coping with all of this? Well, this was an interesting study that was done at the Consumers Electronics Show in Vegas. And they found, because a lot of these are tech geeks or in the entertainment area, they found that 50% of them were using a mix of 2 or more sleep aids to help them sleep per night. What do I mean by sleep aids? Well, this is what I mean. Okay, so here's what we know. This was research that was done between 2008, 2012. They summarized it, and this is comparing. What I did is I've got the arts and entertainment recreation area that you would be classified in, and then food and accommodations. And I included these guys for 2 reasons, which I'll explain in a minute. So when it comes to past month heavy alcohol use, the respondents, this was, by the way, in the US, the arts and entertainment occupational code was ranked 4th for the heavy use of alcohol. You were 2nd in past month illicit drug use and 3rd in past year substance use disorder. Now, if we look at food and accommodation, they were actually 3rd in alcohol use, 1st in drug use, and 1st in substance use disorder. So overall, food and accommodations are basically like the hospitality sector, was ranked number 1 for substance use and abuse. Number 2 was construction. Number 3 was you guys. Now, I kept in these guys because a lot of you who are working in this field also work in this field. That's your kind of your paycheck when you're not working in the film industry, perhaps. So the chances of you having some kind of substance abuse or using substances to help you sleep is not unusual. That doesn't mean they're all good. For example, there's a lot of people think that cannabidiol is a sleep aid. It is not. Cannabidiol is proven as an anti-inflammatory agent. So if you have an inflammatory condition such as lupus or arthritis or something along that line, it can ease those symptoms, which means now those symptoms aren't bothering you when you're trying to sleep. So it will help you sleep better in that regard. But if you don't have an inflammatory condition, it is not a sleep aid. On the other side of the equation, of course, is the THC component of marijuana. And we know that in this regard, people that are chronic users actually have much higher rates of chronic insomnia. So again, not a good sleep aid. In terms of medications, we know that there are 20 million sleep aids that were prescribed in Canada in 2015. It's the fastest growing drug. Well, that was the fastest growing drug in 2015. Now, of course, it is marijuana and its derivatives. And the sleep meds, you have to recognize that they treat the symptoms, not the problem. So we don't like people relying on sleep medications of any sort. Some popular sleep prescription medications, there's the benzodiazepines and non-benzodiazepines. Every one of these was not designed for sleep purposes. Every one of these, if you look at some of these trade names, Xanax, Valium, Dalmine, Ativan, Halcion, all of these were initially designed as anti-anxiety medications. They just had a subsequent side effect of drowsiness. So a lot of times doctors will prescribe these if you want to get some sleep, but you're actually getting an anti-anxiety medication, and you may not need an anti-anxiety medication, and they are very highly addictive. Then we have over-the-counter sleep meds. These are non-narcotic, but the problem with all of these is that a lot of these are basically antihistamines that have been repackaged in a new box and charge more. But the problem with that is that these over-the-counter sleep medications all, for the most part, have one ingredient in common. That's called diphenhydramine. And diphenhydramine has been linked to some very nasty side effects. And in fact, there is a direct link. If people take them more than, if they take them on a weekly basis or several times during the week, there's a direct link to the development of specific depressions and medical disorders, of mental health disorders. So not something that we would want you to rely on there either. Then there's our favorite, melatonin, synthetic melatonin. There are many side effects with taking synthetic melatonin. It used to be hyped quite a bit. We actually now have much more longitudinal research on this. We do not like to promote synthetic melatonin anymore. In fact, if anybody has depressive symptoms, one of the worst things you can take is melatonin. It can actually augment those and put in place more of those suicidal thoughts. So please avoid in those situations. It's certainly not recommended for kids. One of the side effects of, well, there's a lot of side effects, including things like upset stomach, lethargy, just that ongoing grogginess throughout the day after you've used it, but very, very vivid, horrific nightmares. And you certainly don't want your kids to experience that. You can try melatonin-rich foods. There's a list here on the side here. In particular, the high ones are walnuts, corn, and rice, and ginger root. So those are all really good examples of some melatonin-rich foods you can eat. Or you can actually go and buy tryptophan. Now, tryptophan comes under two different labels. It either says L-tryptophan or it says 5-HTP. Tryptophan is just a derivative of 5-HTP. But basically, they're monitored or they're marketed as stress relief tablets. But that's because what they do is they give you enough tryptophan so that now you can produce serotonin, which then will be converted to melatonin. So by ingesting tryptophan, it'll actually help you develop your own natural melatonin, which the body is much more inclined to like than synthetic. So how do you know if you're getting the sleep you need? Quick little quiz for you. Add it up in your head. It's not too hard in math. You're going to give yourself a score of 0, 1, or 2. How consistent do you go to bed? If you're really consistent, you get up and you go to bed at the same times every day, then you get a 2. If it's a little bit inconsistent, give yourself a 1. If it's all over the map, give yourself a 0. Sleep quality. Are you satisfied with the quality of your sleep? You wake up refreshed and ready to go, or are you tossing and turning most of the night or getting up and having to go to the bathroom and other things? Alertness. When you wake up, you feel alert and refreshed, and you can maintain your attentiveness during the workday. 0, 1, or 2. Your midpoint of sleep is typically between 2 and 4 a.m. 2 and 4 a.m. is our prime sleep period. It's the deepest, darkest part of the night, and that's when we should be in our deepest, darkest points of sleep. So your midpoint, if it's between 2 and 4, that's a 2. If it's just outside of those or leaning more heavily to one end or the other, give yourself a 1. If you're outside of that, give yourself a 0. Efficiency. This is how long it takes you to fall asleep. If you fall asleep within 30 minutes of your head hitting the pillow and you have few waking episodes throughout the night, give yourself a 2, otherwise a 1 or a 0. And the last one, duration. You are consistently averaging between 7 and 9. If so, give yourself a 2. If it kind of happens, give yourself a 1. If you're nowhere near it, give yourself a 0. You add up your score. And ideally, you want to be above the 6 range, and the higher you get towards 12, the better your health is going to be. The lower you are, 6 and lower, that means poor sleep, which means you're going to have an impact definitely on your health. So, kind of summarizing this here, here's some things you need to do to balance sleep and stress. Take tryptophan. It's a great way to help serotonin be produced in your body. You can't buy serotonin, by the way, as a supplement. You buy amino acid tryptophan. Then it's produced into serotonin. That will produce melatonin. You can also go outside. You can also eat melatonin, and you can use a light box. So let me go into this a little bit more. Even when it's raining, and welcome to Vancouver, when it's raining outside, you are much better off going outside into that cloudy, overcast day than you are staying inside with your manufactured light, okay? Your manufactured light is going to be maybe to 100, 150 lux of light. Going out on even a cloudy day, you're going to be around 10,000 lux of light. Now, if you can't get out into sunlight, if your schedule doesn't allow for it, or if you're having to sleep during daylight hours, one of the things that we can get is a light box, light therapy, and they're very valuable tools, and there's timing that has to be done with this, but it's easy to learn what works best for you. And if you don't want a light box, you can get light glasses. And here I'm modeling one of the more popular models. This is a typical light glass that only hits the eyes with a particular spectrum of color. which is actually meaning that we don't need to have 10,000 lux of light with this. We would want 10,000 lux with a light box. That's what you would look for if you're buying a light box. 10,000 lux is your minimum. But with these, you could get away with even 50 lux of light because it's not showing all of the white light. It's only showing the blue spectrum light that is the direct impact on your circadian rhythms. And that's 10 times higher in magnitude when it's just the blue light. So that would be much higher in terms of lux. All right, I think we've covered a lot of territory here. We've got 5 minutes left for questions. I'm gonna reduce this and stop sharing. If you want more information, please feel free to reach out to me. And Manu, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. That was wonderful presentation. Amazing. We have been getting some questions here on the comments here on the side, and I would encourage you all to even drop in some questions as I ask some of these questions here. So please send it to me directly, and on Facebook too. If you're watching this, please do ask questions, and we'll try to get maximum out of Mike before she leaves us today. So Mike, one question that came up is you talked about sleep aids and medications, etc. How does it affect work schedule the next day? And the question was, do we need to inform supervisors if we take any?
I think it's kind of a tricky question. If you're taking them for medical reasons, then you do not have to, you may have to disclose it under certain conditions. It really comes down to the employment code and human rights and all of the stuff attached to that. But what's really important to recognize is what is the role that you're going to be doing when you perhaps are in an impaired state. In other words, if you're in a safety sensitive position, probably a good idea to go talk to your supervisor and say, hey, look, I'm struggling today. I took a sleep med and I'm feeling if I'm just groggy, I'm drowsy. I don't feel safe doing this. I don't think this is the right job for me to do at this time. Can we move it to a later time? Can we transfer it to somebody else? Can we put it in a different part of the schedule? And you work together to try and find a way around this so that nobody is at risk. That's the best way to handle it.
Perfect, great, thank you. There is another question here which says that can we have multiple micro sleeps or long naps to cover 8 to 9 hours in a day? And can that help minimizing fatigue?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is no, because naps will not replace sleep. They are a supplement. So if you're not getting your 7 hours, adding in a couple hour nap would be great to get, if you're only getting 5 and now you've bumped it up to 7, but you cannot get 3 or 4 hours of sleep and think that naps and microsleeps are going to help you. Microsleeps are not something you plan. They just happen. That's your brain saying, you're not looking after me, I'm out of here. And it shuts down all of your sensory perception. It's a very frightening thing because you could be actually in the middle of doing something important, such as driving, such as reading something on a screen that's important for you to make a decision on. And you just can't do it because your brain is shut down. So no, you need to have that solid consolidated block of sleep. If you have 1 night of short sleep or 2 nights of short sleep, you might be able to make up for that a little bit. But if you're awake, for example, if you're awake for 24 hours, it's going to take you at least 7 solid consolidated blocks of sleep in a row for you to offset that being awake for 24 hours. You don't recuperate in 1 good night of sleep or 2 good nights of sleep. No, it takes a lot longer than that.
Thank you. Thanks. Interesting. Yeah, we'll make sure that we all sleep properly. There is another question here. Interesting question. You said that we need to be as much away from the screens or phones. But the question is, but are there any apps on phone that sleep or calming down? Unfortunately, still need to use a phone for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can't escape it. They're going to be with us no matter what. Ideally, it'd be like, hey, go away, just put them away. But the reality is, it's part of our lifestyle now. There are apps available. In fact, most computer devices now, all of our backlit devices, anything from the last 5 years, basically has blue light filters built into them. So you need to go into your devices, whether it's a tablet, a smartphone, a laptop, go into your settings. Even Windows 10 now has a blue light filter attached to it. And what you want to do is activate those filters And you want to set it based on your schedule. If you have to be awake at nighttime, then you may want to have a different setting on it compared to people who are awake 24 or awake just during their daytime hours, because that's when they work. So go in, look at those settings, play with them, but basically what you want to do is minimize the blue light, filter it out when you're getting into the evening hours, and that will help to prevent the suppression of melatonin being produced. It's that blue spectrum of light, a particular stream between 440 and 490 nanometers, that screws up our melatonin production. So
Interesting.
yes.
Great, thank you. So yes, we will make sure that there is a blue light filter even on my screen moving forward. Another question here is, how does seasonal changes affect wake sleep cycle, and any tips to cope up with the fall coming up?
Oh God, I am in the middle of just a nightmare regarding this, because all of the top leading edge sleep neurobiologists and researchers in the field are all behind the elimination of daylight savings time. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people in political positions who are pushing for permanent daylight savings time because they don't understand. What they want to do is they just want to eliminate the need to change in summer and fall. But what they don't realize is that there is a huge impact on our circadian rhythms if we go to daylight savings time, which pushes sunlight later into the day. Especially up here in Canada, we're really going to feel it because we have more northern climates and we have darker periods. So what happens is if we go on daylight saving time, we're actually pushing sunlight later in the day, and people think, oh, that's great, I get to be up later in the day now with all the sunlight. But what you're doing is you're making, for example, kids in particular, getting up early in the morning in the dark periods. They're not awake. Now they've got to go to school. They can't function as well. Their sleep is going to be impaired. And then you get light exposure later into the evening that you don't want, because now you have to go to bed, but you've had too much light exposure and suppress that melatonin. So it's actually, from a circadian health perspective, none of us in our field want daylight savings time. We all want permanent standard time. And we have some work to do.
Well, fingers crossed for that, definitely.
Yes.
So one last question here is, how can we encourage productions to plan for better scheduling, especially considering the sleep patterns are very different, and not to induce fatigue?
I think when it comes to dealing with the leadership aspect of it, the organizational leadership and those people, we need to present a good business case. And by that I mean we have to start demonstrating the link between people's ability to perform and absenteeism and quality of work and errors and omissions. And what we do in other industries is we actually go in and I can look at a whole bunch of different accidents or incidents that have occurred. And if I have the information to look at their sleep history, or to look at the number of shifts they worked, or the number of days they worked with the number of hours, attach that over a 7-day period, I can guarantee you I'll find a link between fatigue and that incident if they exceeded normal working hours or worked ridiculous hours or had erratic sleep schedules. We'll be able to prove that. And so we can link that directly to incidents. Now we're talking cost factors. Now we're talking replacement workers. Now we're talking the impact on production schedules because certain people can't perform and maybe we don't have a backup. So insurance costs go through the roof. So there's definitely the business side that we need to link so that production understands the value of having good schedules that are more regulated.
Perfect, thank you. I will just wait and see if there is any other question coming in. With none so far. Thank you, Mike.
My pleasure.
Time has come to an end, and if you want to learn more about this subject, please visit us at www.actsafe.ca, where we will have additional resources and links to all of our Actsafe Injury Prevention Week presenters' websites. If you have an opportunity, space is still available for our remaining sessions. So head over to our AIP Week page and register for additional sessions if you can. One of the best ways of dealing with mental health awareness is by showing support to everyone working to make a difference. On behalf of Mike Harnett and the Actsafe Safety Association, I want to thank you all for joining us today and supporting us in our annual Safety Week initiative. Take
Thank
care.
you, everybody.
Stay safe.